Like at 7 in the morning, you can get really good deals. And they have a really good variety of vendors. I love High Fidelity in West Adams.
Okay.
And then Sound Stations, which is in near LAX. Uh,
Gotcha.
it's like Westchester. Yeah. They've been there, I think, since like the 70s or 80s. And then they have really good stuff there too. So kind of
Sound
all the
station?
sound stations. Yeah, sound
Okay.
stations. They're
Sound
off of
stations.
Sepulveda and like Westchester, I guess. It's just like it's like Inglewood and LAX, and they were like right in the middle between Inglewood and LAX. Yeah.
Okay. Any I heard you say West Adams. Is that near USC? Like I'm not from LA,
Yeah,
so
High Fidelity is on Adams and like Crenshaw, between Crenshaw and La Brea.
okay.
And those guys used to work at Aaron's on Highland.
Okay.
Aaron's was a legendary record store for many decades. And so now the two owners, Ray, and Stanley, they run High Fidelity now in West Adams. High Fidelity also used to have a location in Hollywood and Los Feliz, and then they took over the shop right before COVID. So, uh,
Mm,
but they have a really great. They're super just knowledgeable. The prices are really reasonable for
okay.
used records, and they primarily focus on used. So, it's down the street from USC. It's like really close. So
I
yeah.
can't believe I haven't been there. Like I
That might be
go,
your closest record store besides anything in downtown.
you know
Yeah.
what? This is something that's interesting because I've actually looked for, speaking of mapping and record stores, I've actually looked for record stores and it doesn't like I can't like it hasn't like popped up for some reason. Like when I look for it.
Yeah, they're kind of an institution now.
Mm,
They're only open, check their hours. I think they're closed Mondays and Tuesdays maybe, so just
mm,
check their hours. But they're just yeah, I had Ray on for the panel at the library, the Central
mm,
Library a month ago, and
mm-hmm.
just a wealth of knowledge. Just the amount of history at Aaron's, the types of DJs, musicians who came through Aaron's, they all like met at Aaron's and collaborated. And Jay Dilla was a very, very
Mm.
like loyal follower of Aaron's, and he would just go there all the time and just like find stuff that he would then sample, like obscure stuff in the dollar bins, and he would just find these like gems. So
Yeah, those dollar bins. Well, yeah, Leah and I like are working on this research paper where we are kind of combining record stores and bookstores. We're talking about whether or not bookstores contribute to the identity of Los Angeles, like these clusters, and we found that there's a lot of overlaps between bookstores and record stores. So we kind of joined forces because Leah, so I'm already introducing Leah in this mix, but Leah is like she has book clubs too, so that's kind of her um gateway into this, circle of books and records and things like that. So welcome. I need to reconfirm how we pronounce your name. So it's Diane or
yeah, it's just
Diane?
Dyanne Cano. Yeah.
Diane Cano. Okay. So I was like, I don't know, Diane, so Diane
I
Cano.
get Dwayne a lot. I used to get Dwayne as a kid because they would see the Y and they think it's a U. So yeah,
Okay.
so it's all good. I've heard it all. No, it's fine.
All right. Yeah. All right. So, anyways, usually, well, welcome to Tacos de Sesos. Tacos de Sesos is a podcast that I started with another colleague from political sciences here at USC. And what we do is we invite either researchers or people who are knowledgeable about a specific topic and just basically nerd out. And we like to start with like difficult questions. So I'm going to start with one difficult question for you, and I think is so why record stores? Why do they matter now that we have so much? And I'm gonna say quote unquote access to music via, online platforms and streaming.
Well, thanks for having me on again. And I'm really excited to talk about all things records and record stores in LA. So I strongly feel that as humans, we love being able to feel things and have physical things in our possessions. I think as a society, as a culture throughout the ages, I think that there's a real connection that we have to symbols and to tactile things that have a lot of symbols in them. And I think music is such a, for me at least, and I think for a lot of people, is such a signifier of that. I grew up with physical media. I grew up with tapes, cassettes, CDs, and vinyl records. That I think in this era of everything being digital and having access to at your fingertips to almost any, not everything, but almost anything that you want to listen to, uh, it doesn't fill that need that we have as people to have something to say like this means something to me. There's artwork, there's a physical aspect to this, but that physical aspect I think runs deeper, and I think it symbolizes things like memory, things like what that music means to you, and what it's sort of like a physical representation of sound in a lot of ways. And I think that that is a huge, we as people need that. I at least I do, and I know there's a lot of people like me, audiophiles, music lovers. You even can think about people who are collecting DVDs and VHSs again. Like I think that it's a real it's not just nostalgia. I think that kind of minimizes it. I think it speaks to this larger our larger identity as people, where the things that surround us um, is
Do you,
part of our identity. Like it is
of
part of my
course.
identity at least.
Yeah, do you think it's more of a finished product too? I feel like with the digital platforms, I don't know. I'm an old head too, and maybe we can get Leah to chime in here, but like I feel like records and just the physical thing, it is just a more of a finished product. Sometimes I feel like like these streaming platforms, you can just release one song or two songs, and then
Mhm.
you can, go viral because of one song, but you really don't have a full like blown like concept where you're thinking about the cover art and it's like a lot of things that are mixed in there that makes that so special. I don't know if Leah has anything to say about that in this sense.
Yeah, definitely. I think the other day, Iskar and I were listening to this record that he got me, and we thought, well, we can sit down and listen to this record without skipping through, as opposed to today where you're just listening to Spotify and you can skip the song and rather than just really being forced to sit with whatever you're listening to and be open-minded.
Yeah, and the stores themselves, I think they open for experiences. I think again, I'm gonna go back to Leah and then maybe come back to Dyanne. We also talked about this, like, there's this like randomness about going to a record store that you don't get when you're in Spotify or another thing like that. I mean, there is this, you can kind of run into like a song that you like, but this physical encounters are really just off the wall. And I think, I don't know if you want to tell us about that thing that happened to you, Leah, really recently about this record that you bought.
Yes, okay. So, I randomly bought a record from 12's, which is Iskar's Brothers record shop in Long Beach. And I brought it home and I was listening to it. I was like, wow, this is exactly what I wanted. The cover art is so pretty. The songs is very much in my style. And my friend came over and she saw the record and was like, "Oh, wait, how do you know about this album?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't. I just randomly picked it up." She's like, "This is my favorite album. I listened to this all throughout high school." And she put it on and was like listening to it and singing along. She knew all the lyrics. So it was this really sweet and serendipitous moment that connected us through this physical object.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what you think about that, Diane, but I feel like those kinds of moments are unique to going physically to a record store or a bookstore in some cases as well.
Totally. I mean, that sounds like Kismet too. Like it was meant to be that, like, it's Iskar's Brothers record store, which is awesome. And then you got to go and then you picked up this record and your friend was like, this means a lot to me. And you had no clue. So it just also feels like the universe is working interesting ways that like, you know, streaming the algorithm won't do that for you. The algorithm doesn't care that like your friend had this emotional connection to this record for so long and things like that. So I think you're both like right for those reasons. I think why in this age of streaming that people are returning to this, or and some people like me have always held on to it and never let it go. The other thing I also remember as a teenager in the 90s, more with CD liner notes, but also with records that I had a small collection of vinyl records, was just like poring over the liner notes. I was obsessed with certain records and like, who was the producer? Who did they thank? Who played on this? You know, or if it was a sample, they would credit whoever, you know, the original sample was from. So all those things you don't find on streaming. You can't find that. And back then when they made records, the cover art, the back art, the liner notes, the sleeves, everything was even like those limited edition. I'm thinking about those limited edition CD box sets or limited edition CD packages were so creative and innovative that it was in addition to the music, it was another experience that you physically could look through. It was really, for me, an art form. I think about all those graphic designers that worked on all of those CD covers and or album covers and liner notes. And there's a real art to it. And I think we as people can appreciate visual, cool visual stuff and cool visual art and design,
Yeah.
you know, design too is huge in for this.
Yeah, it feels like it's a space for collaboration too. It's like you've got producers and you've got people, distributors, and you've got local record shops that are going to distribute your thing, and then you've got like the artists, as you say, the visual artists who help you create the design, the liner notes and everything. So it's a whole process that I think gets lost in digital media. But the next question is more about your work, about your project, and I think also we touched on the importance of records and the experience of record stores at a personal level, but I also think it's important to like the history of the city, especially in a place like Los Angeles, you know, that's historically like a music hub,
Mhm.
worldwide music hub. So tell us a little bit about your project, about and also tell us about yourself. Why did you get into it?
Okay, so I'll start with a little bit about myself because it does, I think, lead into why I did the project. So, I grew up here in LA in the 80s and 90s and uh, went to record stores as soon as I could. And as soon as I had a little bit of allowance and babysitting money, I would go and buy CDs at record stores. And so music has always been such a huge part of my life. And it was also a huge part of my friends' lives. So we bonded over music and we would go to record stores together and we would go to shows together. Music was really what bonded us. And it still continues to bond me. I still have those friendships still to this day. So my background's in nonprofit work and running small businesses. I currently co-run a furniture store called R&D Record Cabinets, and we specialize in storage solutions for record collectors and for their vinyl record collections. And I have a master's in public administration from New York, and I've kind of had very many careers throughout my life, and I've been very grateful for that. I also used to be a concert photographer, whole other world. So, and whole
Oh
other life.
wow.
Yeah, I used to do that a lot. And so, but a sort of a common thread throughout my whole life has always been music and record stores. And even when streaming became, even for me, my first memory, and this leads to, I think, to the map, my first memory of iPods and MP3 players was like, no. I was like, no, I'm not getting rid of my tapes or my cassettes because I could still play them in the car. You know, like I was, you know, I was like, no. Or I would have I remember my really old Volvos would have like a little tape deck. And so I would have the tape deck. Like they would sell, I don't know if you all remember this, but in order to play CDs in a car that didn't have a CD player, you would get the adapter and it was a blank cassette with a wire that was connected then to your CD play, like a little CD player. And that's how I would play CDs in the car.
Yeah,
Um,
I
I
definitely
remember
remember those.
those.
yeah, you remember
Oh,
those?
Leah, you remember those too? I'm
Yeah.
surprised. Those.
So that's how committed I was to physical media, you know? And so, or I would, or we would make mixtapes and like I would burn, you know, I would play a CD and my boombox, be able to put it on a cassette tape and then play that in the car. So I never actually owned an iPod. I never owned an MP3 player. And then that led to streaming. And so I was a late adopter to streaming. I was still very, very tied to my CDs predominantly. And as times change, a lot of these record stores I used to go to closed, and I remember feeling really sad about it, but not really understanding the magnitude of the loss of these record stores. And I didn't really fully begin to appreciate that until probably COVID, when we were all in lockdown, the early days of the pandemic, because I had a lot of time and I still had all my CDs and my records, and I started DJing on Twitch. And I was DJing on Twitch and doing Twitch sessions like twice a week, like 2 hour sets because I had so much time. And people actually like were listening, and it was a really great way to bond with people virtually and share the music that I had. And so it was through that process that I started thinking about, because some of my CDs and records still have the old price tags from these stores. And I just started thinking like, oh, I want to find photos of these stores that I remember going to back in the day. And slowly I started like finding photos and just like saving them to my computer just so I could just always look at them later. And then I thought, okay, well, like I have my list of stores that I remember going to that are gone. There's got to be a directory or some sort or a map somewhere of like all the stores that we've lost in LA in the last, at least like the last 30 years. I wasn't expecting 100 years, but like 30 years. And I couldn't find that list. There were different types of lists. There were some that were on message boards that were dated like 2002, someone on a message board saying, "Hey, I'm coming to LA. What record shop should I go to?" And then people putting in their recommendations. But it was only for that time period, right? Any stores that were open in LA in 2002. Um, Obviously, Yelp and Google Maps has, they you can find the ones that have permanently closed, and that's another resource to find, but you have to dig for that.
Right.
So, I then realized, okay, well, I guess I have to figure this out because now I'm really curious and I want to understand the scale of like what we've lost. And I
Did you
also,
before that,
yeah.
I mean, because it seems like your career is unrelated. So, because
Yeah, no.
it sounds like
So
like you got interested in history and urban history all of a sudden just from this personal experience, or how did that
Oh yeah.
transition?
So I've always loved the city. Like I grew up here. I have a real affinity. I'm really proud of our city. And ever since I was a little kid, like little kid. Like I remember streets and like intersections. When I was in high school, I couldn't afford a car, but my friends who had cars were like, "Take Diane with you because like they'll know where to go. They'll know how to get
Okay.
you there." And this is before MapQuest. This is before anything that was online. This was Thomas guides, is what I brought out.
Okay.
And so they're like, "Oh yeah, let's take Diane because Diane will know the shortcut." And I can't explain. I didn't study maps in high
Hmm.
school, in college. I didn't, it was just like an intuition. I have an internal GPS system. I have an internal compass. And I've always just had anywhere I travel since I've been young, I've always just had a really good sense of direction. Like, and I also need to know what's north and south, what's east and west. And I'm very grounded in that. So in terms of just geography, I've always had this sort of second nature to it. Like I just yeah, talk to any old friends of mine, and they're like, "Oh yeah, you used to know where to go, and like
Y-
you never had to write down directions. You just always knew."
Yeah.
So I
So
think I've
I
always had a sort of an affinity to that,
So I
or like
think we jumped the gun on that question. You already answered that second question. It was like, why maps? And you just kind of told us. So I will ask you, I
yeah,
will ask
please.
you to show us like the actual maps. There's two versions of it,
Yes.
and then we can ask some questions about the maps themselves. I have a whole bunch. So,
So yeah, so to finish the answer though, for for me, I've also been a really good amateur PI for years. Like friends will say, "Hey, I'm looking for somebody. I need their phone number," or "I'm dating somebody. Can you find stuff about them?" And that's like within 30 minutes,
yeah.
I'm like, "Here's their whole bio," you know? So like that also, and then and I just did it for fun. It wasn't like a career, but I feel like I've always been very attuned to detail. So anyway, so this is the first map that came out last year, March 2025. And it's LA County. Both maps are focused just on LA County because I
There's a
there's so
lot,
much
yeah.
already. What's that?
No, that there's a lot. Like just LA County is gonna. You were talking about having to make different versions of it because there was so
I
much.
will. Yeah, there's too many to put on a map on just one map. So
I
so
don't
this
know
is
if you have any questions about that one, Leah, but I've got.
Yeah, I'm wondering how like what application you use to make this, and also where did you find all this historical data?
yeah, so I have a friend who's a really great architectural he has background in architecture and he's a designer, he had designer. And so I forget the name of the software he used. Basically gave him all the data
Mhm.
on a spreadsheet and then he plotted it on the map using it was open source software
Okay.
for mapping. And
QGIS, I guess.
perhaps, yeah, perhaps. So he did both of them for me once I gave him all the data. And then, so to your question about where I found everything, a lot of different primary sources, such as phone books. And I brought a friend of mine
So,
actually still had a 2005 phone book. So phone books, I mean, for people who've never really looked through one, you go under music. Earlier versions of Yellow Pages phone books would have it under record stores, but then when CDs became a thing, they put it under music. So I would just look under music. Luckily, the LA Public Library has digitized many phone books over the years, but not all of them. So then I would have to go to the stacks at the Central Library in downtown LA to go through the ones that weren't digitized. The Library of Congress also has digitized a bunch of phone directories, white pages and yellow pages. Anyways, this is an example of the yellow pages. And then
what would you compare to figure out if it was a defunct? And are you including only like closed record stores, or are you including like record stores that are still open right now?
No, they're completely gone. Like these are record stores that their brick and mortars are gone, and they're not online because some, especially during the pandemic, the early days of the pandemic, a lot of these stores moved to Discogs or eBay, or they have an online store. A lot of them are Instagram selling records still, so they're not on the map because they're still here. They're just in a different version.
Okay.
Uh, so that was the criteria. So yes, 100% they've been gone. And then the other criteria for these early maps is that they're not any chains. Because people remember the big brands like the big names like Tower, Virgin, Warehouse Music. I went to those stores and it's not like I didn't like those stores, but I'm really focused on the truly independent record shops that didn't have 20 locations.
Yeah, that makes sense.
One,
Um,
one for like logistics, but also because it'd just be too many on the map to try to list those. Eventually, I will include them on in the directory in some format. Um, and so not just yellow, so then I also would go through old ads in newspapers like the LA Weekly or the LA Times would run the best record stores of 1988, or there would be mentions of record stores and interviews. And so I was going through a lot of newspapers, a lot of newspapers, and going by decade and going by also, I mean, LA had so many newspapers back in the day, dozens and dozens that don't exist anymore. A lot of local, like hyper local papers as well, where like the local record shop could afford an ad because it didn't cost as much as it would running an ad in the LA Times or LA Weekly even. And then talking to people, and then people submitting through our website, lostrecordstores.com, submitting um, the stores they remember going to, and then me solving those mysteries because they would say, I don't remember the name of the store, but it was on the corner of, 7th and Hoover or something. And so, yeah, so from a lot of different sources, but initially was really going through the yellow pages, white pages, and newspapers and
what about the
cross-referencing.
illustrations though? Or is that also from research? Because you have map one, I like map two a lot. because it feels like more updated, but map one is like cooler because it's got the illustrations. I'm mixed, I
No.
don't know.
Yeah, I mean, these were from ads. These were from the ads that I found, the logos and the ads that they would put in.
Those are so cool, man.
I know.
Yeah.
So, and
You
a
did
lot of
such
these I
thorough
went
work.
I know. This is like you should get like an honorary PhD in anthropology or something.
I've heard this a lot, yes. And some of these are my photos, and then I
But
would just
so what
create
are those?
drawings.
Those are like digitized, like I guess
They're
art
like,
versions of your photos or
yeah, they're like
something.
drawing, like, they're like drawing, like creating like on Photoshop, making them look more like drawings to kind of strip it of its like photo
Mm.
quality.
Okay, and you did that or?
I did that. No, so yeah, so Jeff Sanhueza, who is
Mhm.
the architectural designer, did the map after I sent him my spreadsheet of every single location, all 84 for this map. And then I did the back panels. I designed
Okay.
all this. Yeah, so it's
Yeah,
just
that's
really
super cool.
me and then Jeff partnering with me on the map.
And then you got those stickers too. Are those stickers from the like the actual records that you have, or what are those?
Yeah, it says, yeah, I put it here. It says price tags and labels from Diane's music collection in the 90s. So,
That's
yeah,
so
these
cool.
were from like 45 CDs, LPs, anything I could find.
Okay.
And it's same on the second one, too. These were like
Right.
ones I found, too.
And so tell us about like what is the difference between the first and the second map and like why what are your plans moving forward? Because I feel like it's just gonna get bigger and bigger and
It's
bigger.
already, I know, it's already bigger. So, the second map so the first map has 84 independent record stores that are completely gone, and from 1956 to 2020. So
Okay.
it spans those decades.
Wow.
The second map has a entirely new list of 134 stores that are not on this first map, that don't exist on this first map, that are now 134 new stores here. New stores meaning that they are now added to the directory. And this map goes further back because my goal with the second map was to go as far back as I could to find the first mention of a record store in LA. And from the LA Times, I could find that evidence that that was in 1893. So now this map goes from 1893 to 2025. And it's an entirely new list of closed, completely gone record stores. But since it goes all the way back to the late 19th century, a lot of these stores, you will not find any mention of them online. There's no mention of these stores, many of them, not all of them, but many of them. So that's what this map now includes. Now, when I was working with Jeff on this map, he said, I don't know if I can fit all 134, but I'm going to try my best because I had another 150 that I didn't even send to him because I knew he would not be able to fit another 150 plus 134. So I have on a spreadsheet 150 stores that are just waiting to be added to a map, another map. So that's going to be number three.
Wow.
But
Yeah,
I'm not
that
even
sounds
done
like
with the
fun.
research. I mean, this will never
No,
be
it doesn't
ending.
sound like yeah. I was about to
I'm
say
never going to find every store
I
either.
don't
Yeah.
think you're ever gonna be done. I mean, there's stories. I think something that I saw on your website recently was that you added one that my brother said you, because that one just recently closed, so it's like an ongoing thing where it's like stores open and close
Yes.
often. But I think it reopened, fortunately.
But he said
So,
it's Bagatelle Records, but I believe that they are opening up under a different name.
oh, okay, I
I
see.
think
I
they
don't
bought
know.
the
I
store.
don't know.
But that's
I
what he
was
told
just
me.
I was
But
just
no,
looking.
it's changing
Yeah,
a lot.
I feel
Yeah.
like you're not, I feel like this could be like a just a project that keeps going and going. So you also, I mean, you talked to us a little bit about the local newspapers. I find that that's really hardcore, like research, And so one of the things one of the sources is public notice. And you said this was a project that documents places impacted by gentrification push in the mid 2010. So it seems like gentrification is not like a new project. So what is your take on, or what have you found about, from these little newspapers about this process of how maybe these opening and closing of record stores are tied to these gentrification processes?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that project is of my friend Jesse Castillo, who's an amazing graphic designer, artist, photographer. And so they let me use that photo that they had taken of that store in Highland Park. It's a stunning photo when they sent it to me and we were talking about this project. So, what I've been able to trace, the more popular neighborhoods like Melrose, which had we just did a walking tour. I'm bringing up Melrose because it has gone through a big shift. And there are articles written about the rise and fall of these really cool neighborhoods that used to be gritty and more DIY. And they're gone. Like those subcultures don't exist anymore. So there were articles written about certain neighborhoods like Melrose, which is very much more prominently covered. People talk about Melrose more. I was more interested in figuring out like what happened to the Central Avenue jazz scene, right? There were a lot of great record stores, like Dolphins was this legendary record store that was there for decades. Predominantly black neighborhood with black artists. Um,
Can you explain Central Jazz? Because this is like I'm not from LA, so I
Oh,
don't
okay,
know. Yeah.
yeah. So in the 40s and 50s, everyone thinks about New York jazz scene as being like the world famous jazz scene, the hub of jazz. But the West Coast also had its own huge jazz scene, and it was in LA on Central Ave, basically just south of Little Tokyo down to Vernon. And there was a very famous hotel called the Dunbar Hotel, which housed almost every traveling famous jazz musician from that time period, from the 40s to the 60s. And they would perform on the Sunset Strip, but because they were black, they were not allowed to stay in the hotels in Hollywood. So then they had to stay in in the hotels in black neighborhoods where they were allowed to stay. So the Dunbar Hotel was this gorgeous, beautiful. The building still exists. Very famous hotel that there would be like these jam sessions in the lobby at 2 in the morning. I mean, the stories of just like who came through that hotel and then who came through all of the clubs there was like really, really. There's a lot of great books written about Central Avenue and the jazz scene. And so it was like East Coast, I think gets a lot of um, written about it and for good reason. But West Coast jazz had its own scene. And Charles Mingus grew up in Watts, and I did not know that until I was doing this research. So
That's one of my favorites actually. I love Charles Mingus. I saw his documentary and it just blew my mind. It's just crazy. Yeah.
yeah, and he got his start in like early jazz clubs here in LA before he moved to New York. And so there's so much rich history there. And so with Central Avenue, when you go through phone books in the 40s and 50s, and you go down, the 2 miles or what have you of Central Avenue, and you go through all the stores, they're all black owned businesses, right? So you're seeing record stores, you're seeing the clubs, you're seeing the restaurants, you're seeing gospel record stores, you're seeing churches, you're seeing it was such a cultural hub of activity. It was sort of like the West Coast Harlem, some people would argue, Central Avenue was. And they attribute my very cursory understanding of this history is, there was a lot of manufacturing jobs during World War II and post World War II in LA, and a lot of those factories were like in Vernon and South LA, and so that's also why that area flourished because Black folks had income and they had just more disposable income and they were able to buy homes. Also, like that area was like there was the redlining where you couldn't buy, certain folks couldn't buy homes because you were
Which
not
is
allowed.
this living in, even when that hotel was in a neighborhood that was predominantly black, they weren't allowed to stay in a hotel that was in their own or not.
No,
And
no,
that's
no,
kind
no.
of where
They
I'm getting
no, no, no.
confused.
That was the only hotel they could stay in. So if like Billie Holiday came in
Oh, okay. I
and
understood the
performed
other
at
way
the
around. That's a good
sorry, yeah, and
clarification. Yeah.
performed at a club on the Sunset Strip, she was allowed to perform on the Sunset Strip, but she was not allowed to stay in a hotel on the Sunset Strip because it was like for whites only. So the place like the Dunbar Hotel was known to be, it was black owned. It was a hotel for black folks, traveling from all over the world. And so yes, that's what it was. But of course, just the hypocrisy, just all of it, that they could perform on the Sunset Strip, but they could not stay there overnight. They had to. So then you had then just every night you had amazing, talented artists staying at the Dunbar Hotel, black artists staying at the Dunbar Hotel on Central Avenue. And so then all of these clubs were popping up. And then what happened was they started to get rid of the redlining of housing. And so black folks were then able to move out of Central Avenue and out of the South LA and move to suburbs where they could buy other types of homes or other homes. So that was my understanding of why. And then also those jobs in manufacturing by the 60s were gone. And so then people weren't living in those areas or weren't being able, they had to shift and find different careers in other neighborhoods or in other areas. So there was really like a 20, 30-year period where like Central Avenue was really vibrant and had so much going on. But because of economic reasons, and then, you also had like the 60s uprisings as well. Like there was just a lot of turmoil that it didn't last much longer than 2 or 3 decades. And not necessarily gentrification, right? It's because now South LA also has a large Latina population, which, really shifted in the 90s and 2000s. Um, Anyway, so when I'm looking at these maps and I'm looking at the primary sources of yellow pages, if you compare the types of stores that are on Central Ave now versus in the 40s, you can really tell a story of just like where did people go and what happened to these neighborhoods that have shifted. I mean, a very easy one is like Highland Park, right? You look at the stores in a yellow pages in the 80s or 90s in Highland Park on York or on Figueroa and like compare it to now and it's night and day.
Yeah.
Um, and you
As
had more Latino record stores in Highland Park back in the day than you do
sure,
now.
that makes sense. Another difficult question is how do you balance conservation with, with change and with progress? Because I think gentrification is always framed as this bad thing, but there's also some parts where it's like, okay, so there's money coming in, which is not necessarily always bad, but how do you balance conserving places like these, like record stores, hotels, and then moving forward? How do you balance, how do you think that looks? Especially in terms of record stores with so much history and things like that, and venues.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I think housing policy is really key when it comes to preventing displacement in communities because when we talk about gentrification, like everyone wants nice things, right? Like when we bring a park um, to a neighborhood, then we're putting that neighborhood at risk of green gentrification, or a transit stop, then that also historically shows displacement of those communities. So, how do we keep the culture and the economic, um, how do we keep the culture, preserve the culture and the small businesses in that area while providing these essential amenities and preventing displacement? So all of these changes have to go hand in hand with affordable housing measures and incentives for small businesses. Um, but of course, the way that the real estate market has changed and shifted, it has caused a lot of harm to these communities.
Yeah, and I think this idea of mapping or studying record stores in LA, one of the first comments that I got was, yeah, but doesn't like if a new record shop opens like in a neighborhood, is that like an indicator of gentrification, which is like totally the opposite of what we're talking about here again. What do you think about that, Diane? In the sense that for some people, it's like record collecting is sometimes thought of as like something that is not accessible to everybody, and sometimes these stores to some people could feel like a starter for gentrification. In Mexico City, the same thing happens with art galleries. Like my wife and I love to go to art galleries, and we think it's great that they're there, but at the same time, the locals always feel like, oh shit, they just
Yeah.
opened an art gallery. The rent's going up tomorrow. Is that the same effect with record stores in LA, do you feel, or not? Or is that like a bad question from these people?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a valid question. And I also think now, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, record collecting wasn't that expensive to do. Now records have just gone up in price. I mean, for new and used. Supply demand, obviously there's not enough record manufacturing facilities in the world. So like things take a long time to make vinyl records. Like you can't anyway. So yeah, so I do think like a record store opening up today in a neighborhood, I think it depends on the neighborhood where it's opening and what kind of client, like what kind of customers they're trying to draw and attract. If it's a new record store in like I grew up in Pico Union, like, and it's mainly Spanish language music, or, then okay, well, this isn't really gentrification because it's catering to the community that's there already. K-Town has one of the oldest record stores, CD stores in the city, in one of the malls there, and I'm trying to remember the name of it. And it's been there since like the late 90s, and so like I mean, so if you have a K-pop or J-pop record store opening up in Koreatown or in Little Tokyo, I think has the longest, oldest record store that still caters to Japanese music. So um everything that Leah said, I completely agree with. And I think that we don't have enough laws and policies in place to balance changes like what we're seeing in a lot of neighborhoods now. And I'm not an expert in gentrification or in public policy per se, but just from my own understanding of neighborhoods as I've grown up here for, I've been here now for over 40 years, and seeing the marked shifts in communities, uh, what I feel like prevails is uh, real estate and money and profit, and and everything else gets tossed aside for that. So it's a very multi-layered situation and issue, and I don't think anyone has been able to find like the one solution for this. I think talking about it and making sure like our local like city council members are aware of it, and we elect people who are well versed in this and who have plans around neighborhoods shifting and changing, I think is really important. But yeah, so I don't know
Okay.
if that fully answers your question, but I
No, no. I
think that they
mean,
can they can reflect changes in a neighborhood for sure.
I think that the best part, obviously everything I agree with what you say, but the best part was like it's an ongoing discussion, and as a somebody who's doing a PhD and interested in like geography and how space is built and how it's constructed, then that's definitely like a topic that's always top of mind. I mean, I don't know about Leah, but for me, I'm always thinking about that situation in geographical terms.
Yeah, and I think your project is such a great way of capturing these neighborhood changes because oftentimes it's really hard to prove gentrification, especially
Mhm.
in court, right? People say, well, people move all the time. But this is such a powerful way to tell a story and this narrative around displacement and what happens when um, there's no regulations and what is actually lost um, because of these harmful urban planning mistakes.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way because I think Leah has to go, and I think that's a really good way to kind of start wrapping up. But so I'm gonna leave that part about record stores there, but we have like one extra question which I'm super interested in because we share a lot of musical tastes. But